Hello and welcome to the Great Legal Minds on LawWiser. Today, our guest is Mohit Kapoor. He is the managing partner, Universal Legal. Mohit, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aman. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. We will actually be straight away diving down to our questions. And my first question to you, Mohit, is that how do you see the current business scenario? And what are we saw a lot of actually sectors biting the dust due to lockdown and the restrictions imposed. What are the sectors now that are going to drive the growth for the business and economy in general and for legal industry in particular?
Right. So that's a really good question, Aman. I think when COVID hit in March last year, we were in the middle of several M&A private equity transactions, which were at different stages of completion. And, there was some level of enthusiasm that was there pre-COVID that, things are picking up for the market, for the mid-market especially. All of a sudden, COVID comes and then there's a huge cloud that was put over consumption and, over business in general. And there were several businesses that we sort of encountered that have had to adapt and change the way that they actually function. So e-commerce actually picked up in a very big way. So we have clients who are in the food and beverage sector who actually did extremely well during the lockdown period. Since governments have now come in and sort of put stops for real estate market has been booming in Bombay for the last 4 months or so. Stamp duty has been reduced to a large extent. And we've seen a number of fence sitters who've actually gone ahead and done their transactions because the stamp duty is reduced from 6% to 3%, 2% between October and December, and now from Jan to March quarter it's about 3%. So there's a huge traction in real estate that we see. Number of startups that we've advised as well. Incredibly, it's interesting to know that during lockdown, we've seen people who've actually started new businesses. And the whole business model, because it's moved online, I think it's quite fascinating that people have picked up opportunities that were always there before, but never actually had the desire or the sort of courage to actually go and do what they had to do. So I see huge opportunity. Consumption patterns have changed from that perspective, and I see huge opportunity in most sectors. I'd say barring a few like infrastructure and maybe some others which are very heavy capital intensive. I see huge opportunities now with the government coming in and announcing this big disinvestment sort of plan of theirs. I can see big public-private transactions happening as well. The capital market is booming, so we're seeing a number of IPOs that are coming into the market. There's going to be a very strong pipeline of business for most sectors for the next foreseeable future, 12 to 18 months, the way I look at it.
I think you raised an interesting point about real estate, where the prices were going down and prices were also going down drastically. So it was a great situation for people to go for their real estate. But very recently, it was announced that people will have to actually disclose the source of their income while buying their houses and any real estate. How do you think that is going to impact the demand?
So quite honestly, Aman, I think the source of funding issue has been around for a long time, and people have cleaned up their act to a large extent. I mean, if you look at the way transactions happen, I'm talking about key cities like Bombay and Delhi. Let's talk from Bombay's perspective first, because I'm essentially based in Mumbai. The home loan component is a very large part of the transaction, and because of the property values here, people rely on home loans to a large extent. The element of the sort of undisclosed amount that comes into transactions here is very, very uncommon. I know it's a lot more common in Delhi. I know people have a lot more concerns there. But people are finding ways to get around that, because in Delhi, I know that the circle rates have just been reduced quite recently, by 20%. So you have very sort of creative chartered accountants and people who will assist on that. But, that's not something for lawyers to talk about. We don't talk about that. But I think the market has evolved to a large extent, where transparency has come in and accountability and source of funds has been there for quite some time now. I don't think that we've had any real concern on that. So this new law coming in is only moving in the same direction that the government has sort of moved in the last couple of years to show transparency and to reduce the component of undisclosed money coming in.
Okay. And you know what? So all the sectors that you talked about, barring a few where I think there is a government push on sectors like infrastructure, etc. What is going to bring the growth for people? What about the M&A activities? How they're going to come along? IBC, I think there is. I mean, government I think is not willing to extend any more installation of IBC. So how that is going to bring the growth to the.
Yeah. So I'll touch upon IBC first because we are very active in that area. The moratorium that was introduced in March last year, just at the time of the pandemic, will in all likelihood be lifted very soon. And the functioning of courts, I think to a large extent NCLT will also come back to the physical format very soon. The whole way in which the IBC has evolved over the last 3 years since inception is a very positive direction because we find that the resolution process is actually moving in the way it's meant to. IBC was meant to actually help stressed companies, stressed assets turn around, preserve business, preserve shareholder value. And of late, we've seen that it's actually worked for the purpose it was created. So, for instance, going back in time when you had the BIFR and that entire era, it was not something that actually worked in favor of business revival. That process has started. So there's a lot more confidence in people when they lend to companies or when they invest in companies that there is some certainty that the framework of the law will protect you. In terms of business incentives or rather the push to be given by government, I think they've already started that simplification, decriminalization of LLP Act, I think simplification of filings, encouragement of the one-person companies, and generally I think the compliance burden to a large extent has got streamlined. So it's a lot more automated and a lot less, the human interaction is a lot less than before. So I find that even foreign clients and companies coming into India are finding that the level of or the way in which technology has been brought in to allow business to function is helping in a very large way.
Okay, so moving on to universal legal, Mohit. So, what are your plans for universal legal? What are the practices that are going to bring growth to you? What sectors are going to drive you people crazy in terms of your timing and all of that? So, how are you looking at the growth for universal legal?
Yeah. So if I look back at this last year of the pandemic, which was supposed to be a sort of distress year for business, I think we've had probably one of our best years in the longest time. We've been around 17 years now, and I set up the firm 17 years ago. In terms of practice, our sort of bigger area of practice right now is corporate M&A, private equity, and litigation. Litigation has really picked up in the last year or so. We have upskilled, we have actually added a certain bench strength to our team, and we have a hybrid system where now we have about 75% of our lawyers coming into the office, but a quarter of our employees still work from home or intermittently work from home. So we've enabled that, and the synergies between our teams has been fantastic, despite the fact that we're working kind of part remote, part in office.
What do you think? Sorry to kind of stop you here. What's your view? I'm interested in knowing what's your view on working from home or working from office. What do you think is more effective?
If you ask me personally, I'm the first one who opened office in June last year, and I've been here since June. I am old school in the sense that I like to be at the workplace when I'm working. I completely respect the fact that a lot of my colleagues prefer to do the hybrid, and it works well for me because I think there's an element of flexibility that has come into the Indian sort of work culture, which we need to respect. It was never there before. We never had a concept of working from home. It's now been brought upon us. So I'm very comfortable working in a hybrid fashion with people. I don't have any reservations when people say we're very comfortable working in maybe 3 days a week from home and 2 days from the office. But I believe that there has to be some element of teamwork and interaction and human interaction that happens, because that is very crucial to actually understanding what is expected of you in a client meeting, what is expected by the client. A lot gets lost in communication when we sort of work virtually. And I feel that those gaps need to be bridged. And the only way to do that is to actually have a sort of hybrid system that works.
That's right. Lots of facial and body language cues that you get when you are actually sitting with somebody to understand,
Absolutely.
hear the conversation, which is usually not possible in online space. But I think there's a lot of, I think, I would say unnecessary travel that got cut from our lives. Not only, saved our time, but a lot of money as well. So how do you plan to utilize that money?
The money that we save for the client or that we save for ourselves?
From the unnecessary travel to all the
I
fancy
see.
travels you lawyers do
Yeah.
to Europe and the US and all of those places.
So personally, I've never been a big fan of unnecessary travel. My travel is always necessary, and I always try and optimize travel wherever I go. So, for instance, if I'm in Delhi for a Supreme Court matter, I will fit in a few other things as well for that time. And the time that is saved now because of the lack of travel, I think we're just sort of trying to overcome a lot of the challenges that are still associated with the virtual sort of work environment that we are with. So it's taking a lot longer to do things. I think that's the experience that is common to most of my colleagues in the profession. So that time is being spent well. In terms of leisure time, my leisure time is actually reduced during the entire lockdown period. There has been longer working hours than was there before lockdown started.
Yeah, that's the complaint I think most of us are making. And sometimes travel is done for vanity. I mean, and we actually learned that during the lockdown and after that, that oh, we could have done it to online as well without having to travel to another country and things like that. I think that has somehow, I would say, if not unnecessary travel, that has rationalized the travel for, I think, a lot of us. So I think, yeah, that is one good thing. Now, let me ask you a question related to the legal industry, because there's a lot that is changing, and as we are talking about the use of technology in communication and meeting up with people, I think that has become quite prevalent in legal industry globally. How do you think that is going to drive the sector? What are the things that are going to drive your sector besides technology, say, inclusivity? Because there are some clients who particularly ask for teams with inclusivity, and without that they say that we won't work.
Yeah.
What are the things that would drive the legal sector? What are the things that you have to keep in mind while actually creating the structure for your firm?
Sure. So I think inclusivity is actually a very valid point. We have a very diverse team. In fact, uh, probably 70% of our office is um, sort of a mixed. We have young ladies who are there. We have got young lawyers who are there. It's the diversity is very important. The client wants to see that you're hiring people from all backgrounds and from all sort of perspectives in that sense. In terms of technology, I think AI has come in a big way. It's helping us actually automate a large part of what we do. Time management has already been there for quite some time. But the reliance on communication tools, especially like, let's say, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, has essentially shrunk the entire world. So, such that, when we have our legal network meetings now, we actually have 50 people from all over the world on a conference which is about 2.5 hours, where we would otherwise travel 15 or 20 hours to get to. So the time that has been saved and the barriers that we've sort of broken over the technology or the communication that we've done has actually been very, very effective. If you use it effectively, if you're a good communicator, communication skills today, I think have become so important in the virtual world. That's something that's really there. Now, people, for instance, what we've done as a firm is we've used the initial couple of months of lockdown to actually upskill our lawyers on issues that were not really technical legal issues, but softer issues: communication, empathy, understanding people, understanding perspectives. And that's something that was quite useful to us. So we spent that time fairly well, and we're finding now that the results of that are coming out very well in client interactions.
Mohit, what is one thing that you would want to change about the legal industry?
Difficult question, Aman, but I think the nepotism that existed in the past, still is there in some form or fashion. I think that is the only thing that has to go. If we have to become a merit-based system, we will need to do away with that nepotism that exists, which I think is there, unfortunately prevalent in the legal fraternity, whether it's law firms or whether it's the litigation practice, is something that needs to change because there are so many very good, exceptional lawyers coming out of different parts of India who, for lack of opportunity, are not really getting their moment in the sun or the chance to actually do well. That's something that I would like to change. I find that we come across people from different parts of India who are so highly skilled, such great potential, but because they don't know the right people, lack the opportunity or just miss their calling for that reason. That's the only thing I would like to change.
Brilliant. Okay, now there's some questions which are related to Mohit as a person. And I just want to know how did you start your first job, taking forward from here? Did you start the entrepreneurship journey right from the beginning, or how did you start your career?
So I started with a solicitor firm in Mumbai, which was essentially a litigation firm. And when I qualified as a lawyer, this is when I was an intern. I started interning with a sort of litigation law firm. When I qualified as a lawyer, I moved to Delhi and I worked with the Attorney General of India for 1 year at the High Court and Supreme Court at that point of time. Thereafter, I moved back to Mumbai, worked with some leading corporate law firms before we set up Universal Legal in 2004, 17 years ago. So the first 5 years of my career were largely in litigation and then in corporate. But I did a cross section of work at that point because the legal landscape in the early 2000s, late 90s was that you did everything. It wasn't as organized as it is today. You got opportunity to actually work in sort of various different field sectors. You were able to do a lot more general practice than you are today. And I think that held me in good stead. And I think this is something that we've encouraged and we continue to do even today.
Now, my next question is, so what is the funniest or strangest law you ever came across, whether that is an Indian law or a foreign law?
Okay. I think it's the Bombay Relief Undertaking Act, which basically says that even if you are a bankrupt company, or let's say you've been taken to insolvency or bankruptcy, if you have more than 50 employees, the state will not allow you to go under. It's very intriguing. It's a very interesting Bombay sort of labor-oriented labor protection act, which is there, which still exists even today. And it's really most unusual because in the Western countries or in any country where you have to allow businesses to actually fail, over here we have always resisted businesses going into liquidation or failing. We don't allow companies to die for some reason in this country. So this is the most unusual law I've come across.
Okay. And okay, now another question. What adjectives come to your mind when I say lawyer?
KG. KG is one. I would say shrewd is another. And I would say perceptive.
Okay. So, okay. All right. All right. In fact, so, one of the things that is very important for our viewers to know is that, see, came out of very difficult times, and I think over. And students who have actually graduated in these times actually found it very tough and very unusual environment. So, what's your advice to those students of law who are just coming out of the college or who just came out of college last year? What is it that they should really do to do well?
There is a scarcity of opportunity in the legal fraternity now, especially amongst the law firms. And there are not that much recruitment happening to take in the number of graduates coming. So I would advise any young lawyer coming out of law school to pursue litigation in any form or fashion. I believe that litigation or grassroots litigation is really the best way to start legal training. A lot of people overlook it and then they regret it later on in their careers. But starting off with litigation, whether at the district level or at the high court level or in tribunals, but actually getting down to understanding the legal system and the judiciary and how it works is the most crucial skill. And there will always be an opportunity whichever part of India you are in to actually get that experience. So most people from smaller towns, cities believe that they have to come to Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai to actually get exposure. There is exposure available everywhere, even in B towns, in smaller cities. You have to pick up the litigation experience to start with. That's the only way to actually make the most of your initial few years of practice.
Thank you very much, Mohit. That was Mohit Kapoor, Managing Partner, Universal Legal. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back soon with the next episode with another great legal mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Aman. Good to be here.